My son didn't cry when my brother said it. He froze. That's the part people never understand. Kids don't always break loudly. Sometimes they go quiet like someone pulled the plug on the room. We were standing in line at the buffet table, paper plates in our hands, the kind that bend if you load them wrong. The music was too loud, laughter everywhere. 50 years of marriage banners hanging crooked from the beams, gold balloons bobbing against the ceiling vents. Noah reached for a second chicken skewer. Just reached. Grant leaned back in his chair, beer already sweating onto the table, and said it like a joke he'd rehearsed. Hey, kids who live off other people should wait until everyone else eats. Not loud, not shouted, clear. A couple forks paused midair. Then the sound hit, laughter. Not all at once. One snort, then a chuckle, then a wave. Someone said, "Oh my God." Someone else clapped like it was a punchline that landed. My mother covered her mouth, smiling into her hand. My sister shook her head like Grant was too much, but she was laughing too. My father stared at his wine glass like it had personally offended him. Noah's fingers tightened around the skewer. His knuckles went white. He didn't look at me. He stared at the tray like it had betrayed him. I watched my brother's eyes flick to me, just for half a second. He smirked. That was the second something in me snapped. If you've ever had family treat you like you don't matter, if you've ever watched your child get cut down in a room full of people who were supposed to protect them, hit like and subscribe. I don't tell stories to entertain strangers. I tell them because silence is how this kind of cruelty survives. The music kept playing. Grant took a sip of his beer and added, almost bored, "I mean, rules are rules. Everybody's got to pull their weight. My son was 10 years old. I didn't yell. I didn't say his name. I didn't ask for an apology. I set my plate down, carefully, flat on the table. I took Noah's hand. His palm was damp, cold. We walked away while they were still laughing. The gravel crunched under our shoes as we crossed the patio. I could feel eyes on my back. I could hear my mother say my name once, soft, stretched out, like she was smoothing over a wrinkle. Kara. I didn't turn around. Noah didn't speak until we reached the car. Mom. His voice cracked on the word. He cleared his throat and tried again. Did I do something wrong? I opened the passenger door and buckled him in. The seatbelt clicked too loud in the quiet. No, I said. One word, sharp. You didn't. He nodded like he wanted to believe me, but didn't quite know how. I started the engine and drove. The radio stayed off. Streetlights slid across the windshield in slow bands of yellow. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. When we got home, Noah went straight to his room. He didn't ask for dessert. He didn't ask to watch TV. I heard the soft thud of his door closing, and then nothing. I stood in the kitchen with my purse still on my shoulder and listened to the dishwasher hum. The clock on the microwave blinked 9:42. My phone buzzed on the counter. Mom. You guys left so fast. Is Noah okay? Another buzz. Elaine Grant was kidding. You know how he is. Another. Mom again. Let's not make tonight about drama. It's your father's anniversary. I flipped the phone face down. 9 years earlier, a state trooper had stood on my porch and taken his hat off before he spoke. That's how I knew before he opened his mouth. After that, people learned to speak to me softly, like I might shatter if they used a normal tone. The insurance check came 6 months later. A number so big it didn't feel real. Everyone assumed it disappeared into therapy bills and tuition and keeping us afloat. They never asked. They never really wanted to know. The dishwasher clicked as it finished its cycle. Silence rushed in behind it. My phone buzzed again. Grant this time. Grant, don't be dramatic. He needs to toughen up if he's going to eat at grown tables. I picked up the phone. Read it once. Read it again. Then I deleted the entire thread. I walked down the hallway and stopped outside Noah's door. I didn't knock. I just leaned my forehead against the frame. Inside, he was sitting on his bed, with his hoodie still on, staring at his hands. I went in and sat beside him. The mattress dipped. Hey, I said. He didn't look up. Uncle Grant doesn't like me. I swallowed. Hard. Uncle Grant doesn't get to decide who matters, I said. He finally looked at me then. His eyes were bright, not with tears, but with something sharper. Confusion, hurt, a question he didn't know how to ask. "Why did they laugh?" he said. That one hit lower. I pulled him into my side and held him there until his breathing slowed, until the tightness in his shoulders eased. "They laughed because some people only feel tall when they push someone else down," I said. "That's not strength." He nodded like he was filing the information away for later. "Kids do that. They remember the lessons that matter." When he fell asleep, I stayed sitting on the edge of the bed watching his chest rise and fall. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My phone buzzed again. "Mom, honey, your dad's been under a lot of stress. You know how important tonight was." I stared at the screen. Stress. Important. Family. Words they always used when they wanted something from me. I powered the phone off. In the living room, a single lamp was still on. Its light pooled on the coffee table, catching the edge of an envelope I'd set there weeks ago and never opened. I didn't touch it. I went to the window instead and looked out at the street. A neighbor walked their dog. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm chirped and stopped. Behind me, the house creaked, softly settling. Tomorrow they would start calling earlier, louder. They would pretend nothing had happened, or they would say it wasn't that bad, or they would tell me I was overreacting. They always did. I stood there for a long time, hands wrapped around a mug of tea I never drank, watching my reflection in the dark glass. Noah had asked me a question back at the table right before Grant opened his mouth. "Mom," he'd whispered, tugging my sleeve, "is it okay if I take one more?" I hadn't answered fast enough. I answered it now out loud to the empty room. "We don't wait for leftovers," I said. And for the first time that night, my voice didn't shake. People love the story of the brave widow. They like it clean, simple, easy to digest. Poor Kara lost her husband, did her best, struggled quietly, raised a good kid. That's the version my family tells at dinners. The version they use when they want to sound generous. The version that lets them feel kind without ever feeling threatened. They never ask questions that might complicate it. 9 years ago, the call came at 6:14 a.m., a number I didn't recognize. A pause before the voice spoke. A man who said my name like he'd practiced it in the mirror. He said there'd been an accident. He said my husband's name once and never again. He said there was nothing anyone could have done. By the time I got to the hospital, everything important was already over. After the funeral, people filled my fridge with casseroles and my living room with sympathy. My parents moved through my house like inspectors, opening cabinets, counting boxes of tissues, nodding at each other. "You'll be okay," my mother said, squeezing my arm. "We'll help you." Help always came with conditions. The insurance settlement arrived 6 months later. A certified letter, thick envelope, heavy paper. A number with too many commas. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, Noah asleep in the other room, the house quiet except for the refrigerator cycling on and off. I read the amount 3 times because my brain refused to accept it. It was enough to erase fear if you knew how to use it. I told no one the exact figure. At Thanksgiving that year, Elaine joked about how fast money disappears when you're not careful. Grant nodded like an expert and said, "Yeah, you've got to be smart or it's gone in a year." They assumed it was already gone. I let them. What they didn't know was that 2 weeks after that letter arrived, I drove across town to a small office above a dental clinic. No sign on the door, no receptionist. Just a man I hadn't seen since law school sitting behind a desk with a legal pad and a black pen. Julian Price didn't ask me how I was doing. He slid a glass of water across the desk and said, "Tell me what you want protected, not what I wanted to earn. Not how aggressive I wanted to be. Protected." I told him one thing, my son. Julian listened. He always did. Then he asked questions that made people uncomfortable. What happens if your family turns on you? What happens if they decide you owe them? What happens if the business they worship starts bleeding? We didn't talk about revenge. We talked about structure, trusts, notes, collateral, clauses people skip because they assume no one will ever enforce them. Over the next year, my name stopped appearing anywhere obvious. The money moved quietly, slowly, always on paper, always clean. Around the same time, Dawson Logistics started having cash timing issues. That's what my father called them. Temporary gaps, inventory delays, bank paperwork. The first time he asked for help, it wasn't even directly. Kara, my mother, said on the phone, voice low and concerned, "Your dad's company might need a short bridge, just until the next contract clears. You know how these things go." I did. Julian structured the first note at market terms. Secured, boring. Nothing predatory, nothing flashy. My father signed without reading past the second page. After that, it became routine. Every year or so, there was another reason. New trucks, fuel costs, a warehouse expansion Elaine insisted would modernize operations. Grant needed capital to optimize routes after a deal he swore would double margins. They never said thank you. They said things like, family helps family, and it all stays in the circle. They never asked why the help always came fast, or why the terms were so precise, or why the paperwork never had my name on it. They just assumed the widow was being taken care of. At Christmas, they gave Noah gift cards and patted his head. At board dinners, they toasted the company's resilience. At Easter, my father liked to say, "We built this with our own hands." I sat quietly, smiled, passed the bread. Grant got louder as the years went on. More confident, more careless. Once when Noah was 7, Grant laughed and said, "Guess he's set for life, huh? Mom's little insurance policy." I remember the way Noah's shoulders stiffened. I remember the way my mother didn't correct him. That night I went home and reviewed the documents again. Line by line, clause by clause, everything was still in place. The funny thing about people who think you're weak is how honest they get around you. They talked business in front of me like I was furniture, complained about the bank, about regulators, about how annoying it was to answer to anyone. Elaine once said, rolling her eyes, "I can't believe how jumpy lenders get, like we're going to implode or something." I almost smiled. The trigger clause had been there from the beginning. Julian insisted on it. A simple condition tied to reputational harm and material misconduct. The kind of language executives skim past because it sounds theoretical. It had never been tested. Until my brother decided my son deserved to eat last. The night of the anniversary dinner, after I powered my phone off, I went back into the living room and opened the envelope on the table. Inside was a single page. No logo, no emotion, just confirmation. All instruments active, all conditions satisfied. I sat down on the couch and let the silence press in. In the other room, Noah shifted in his sleep and murmured something I couldn't make out. I waited until his breathing evened again. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. At 6:03 a.m., before the sun came up, I turned my phone back on. 27 missed calls, 15 messages. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my laptop. The screen lit my face in pale blue. I typed one sentence. No greeting, no explanation. Proceed. Julian's reply came 4 minutes later. Understood. Notices will be delivered by courier this morning. I closed the laptop. In the kitchen, the coffee maker clicked on automatically the way it did every weekday. The smell filled the room. Normal. Ordinary. I poured Noah a glass of orange juice and set it next to his bowl. Cut his toast into triangles like I always did. When he came in rubbing his eyes, he looked at me carefully. "Are we still going to school?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Everything stays the same." He nodded, relieved. As we pulled out of the driveway, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my father. I watched it ring until it stopped. Somewhere across town, a courier was knocking on a glass door with a thick envelope in his hand. And for the first time in years, the story they told about the helpless widow was about to collapse under its own weight. The courier arrived at Dawson Logistics at 8:12 a.m. That detail mattered later when they started arguing about timelines. When they tried to convince themselves this had been brewing for weeks and not triggered by one stupid sentence spoken over a buffet table. The envelope was thick, cream paper, raised lettering, the kind that never brings good news. My father was already in his office jacket, still on coffee, untouched. He signed for it himself. He always did. He liked the feeling of control, the ritual of it. He didn't call me right away. That was the first crack. Instead, he called Elaine. Elaine called Grant. Grant called the company lawyer. By 8:27, the glass conference room lights were on. By 8:35, voices were raised. By 8:41, someone slammed a fist on the table hard enough that the wall-mounted screen flickered. At 8:44, my phone started vibrating on the kitchen counter while I was packing Noah's lunch. I didn't pick it up. The notice was clean, clinical, no drama, no accusations, material default, accelerated maturity, 10 business days. The oxygen didn't disappear all at once. It thinned. That's how real panic works. Banks don't scream. They pause. Vendors don't shout. They hesitate. Credit lines don't vanish. They tighten. By 9:10, the controller noticed the fuel card dashboard blinking yellow instead of green. By 9:22, a dispatcher complained that a regular shipper hadn't confirmed a load. By 9:30, my father finally called me. "Kara," he said, trying for steady and missing. "We got something this morning. I need you to tell me what's going on. I was spreading peanut butter on bread. Smooth. Even. I'm getting Noah to school," I said. "This is important." "So is my son," I replied, and hung up. At school drop-off, Noah hopped out of the car like nothing in the world had shifted. He waved once and disappeared into the building. I waited until the doors closed before I pulled away. My phone buzzed again. Grant this time. No greeting. "What the hell is this?" I didn't answer. At 10:03, Elaine left a voicemail. Her voice was tight professional the way she sounded in meetings when she was pretending not to panic. "There's been a misunderstanding. If you know anything about the note that came in, you need to speak up. This affects everyone. Everyone. It always did when they were scared." By noon, the first real consequence landed. A regional supplier moved Dawson Logistics to prepaid terms. No warning, no discussion, just an email with 3 sentences and a PDF attachment. My father forwarded it to Elaine with a single line, "Call them." She did. It didn't help. At 12:47, Grant stormed into my parents' house without knocking. My mother called me from the kitchen, her voice shaking. "Honey, your brother's here. He's saying awful things." I pictured him pacing, hands in his hair, that familiar mix of rage and entitlement. "Tell him to lower his voice," I said. She hesitated. "Kara, please. This isn't the time." I ended the call. The first knock on my door came at 2:18 p.m. I watched it through the door camera. Elaine, sunglasses on, phone pressed to her ear even as she rang the bell. She rang it twice more before she realized I wasn't answering. Her message came 30 seconds later. "Open the door. We need to talk like adults. Adults don't mock children at dinner tables." I went back to folding laundry. By the end of the day, the word had spread inside the company. Drivers talk. Office staff talk faster. At 4:09 a yard, supervisor posted in a private group asking if anyone else's pay portal was glitching. At 4:22, someone replied with a screenshot of a declined fuel transaction. At 4:31, my father called again. This time his voice was hoarse. "The bank wants an emergency call at 6. They're asking questions about our capital structure." I said nothing. "Kara," he pressed. "Please." I closed my eyes. "Did you ask Grant why he thought it was acceptable to humiliate my child?" I asked. Silence. "That's not what this is about," he said finally. "It is for me," I replied, and ended the call. That night my mother showed up with a casserole. She stood on the porch shoulders, hunched foil-covered dish clutched to her chest like an offering. She rang the bell once, then again. Through the camera, I watched her mouth form my name, watched her wipe her eyes with the back of her hand. I didn't move. She left the dish on the mat and walked away. At 7:54 p.m., Grant came. No bell, just pounding. Kara opened the door. He leaned close to the camera. His face filled the screen, red and angry. "You think you're clever," he shouted. "You think hiding fixes this Noah was doing homework at the table." He looked up, eyes wide. I muted the feed. Grant stayed for 11 minutes, long enough to leave 3 voicemails. The last one cracked halfway through. "Dad's freaking out," he said. "This is serious. If you know who's behind this, if you have any pull, use it. Family doesn't do this to family. Family doesn't do what you did either." By the next morning, the oxygen was gone. The bank meeting went badly, so badly that my father didn't bother calling me afterward. Instead, Elaine did. "They're freezing the revolver," she said, skipping pleasantries, "pending clarification." And I asked, "And we need liquidity. Now." I looked out the window at the quiet street. No, I said. At 11:36, a major client requested written assurance of financial stability. At 12:15, another paused contract negotiations until further notice. At 1:02, Grant sent a text with no punctuation. "We are going to miss payroll." I didn't respond. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with Noah, quizzing him on spelling words while my phone buzzed itself nearly off the counter. I corrected his handwriting. I poured him milk. I signed a permission slip. Outside our little bubble, a company that had once bragged about never missing a check was suffocating. At 6:48 p.m., my father finally sent a text. "It's getting bad." I stared at the words. Then I typed back one sentence. "You should have thought about that before you laughed." He didn't reply. That night, after Noah was asleep, I stood at the sink and listened to the water run. The house smelled like soap and clean cotton. Ordinary. Safe. Across town, conference room lights burned late. Voices frayed. Tempers snapped. The Dawson family was learning something they'd never bothered to teach their youngest member. What it feels like when the room goes quiet and no one comes to save you. The collapse didn't come with sirens. It came with silence. By the fourth day, Dawson Logistics felt wrong even from the outside. Trucks sat idle in the yard like animals that sensed something coming. Office lights stayed on too late. Doors closed more often than they opened. When people know they're losing control, they get loud first. Then they get ugly. Elaine showed up at my door at 7:11 a.m. on Thursday. No sunglasses this time. Hair pulled tight. Makeup rushed. She didn't ring the bell. She knocked with the side of her fist. "Kara," she said through the door. Calm. Forced. "We need to reset the tone." Reset. Like this was a meeting that had gone off script. I watched her on the camera while Noah ate cereal at the table behind me. "You're scaring people," she continued. "Drivers, staff, Dad." I didn't move. Her phone buzzed. She checked it, swore under her breath, and knocked again. "This isn't about your feelings," she snapped. "This is about hundreds of families who rely on that company." I opened the door just enough to be heard. "You laughed," I said. "Remember." Her face went still. "That was Grant," she said quickly. "Don't punish all of us for his mouth." I met her eyes. "You were smiling." Her jaw tightened. The mask slipped. "You're being vindictive," she hissed. "This is exactly why no one ever gave you real responsibility." There it was. The truth always comes out when people panic. I closed the door. She stood there for a full minute before walking away, heels striking the concrete like punctuation. By noon, the emails started leaking. A client forwarded an internal message by mistake, subject line, contingency planning. Another copied the wrong distribution list, asking about alternate carriers. Elaine tried damage control. Grant tried intimidation. My phone lit up with his name at 1:26 p.m. I answered this one. "What do you want?" I asked. "You've made your point," he said, breathless. "Enough already." "I didn't make any point," I replied. "You did!" He exhaled hard. "You think you're some mastermind? You're not even on the board." I smiled. "I don't need to be." He paused. "Dad's in the ER," he said suddenly. "Chest pain. They're running tests." There it was, the guilt card. "I hope he's okay," I said, and meant it. "Is Noah supposed to fix that too?" "You're sick," Grant snapped. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said. "I'm finished being invisible." I hung up. That evening my mother came again. No casserole this time, just herself. Rain-dark coat, hair damp, eyes red. She didn't knock. She sat down on the porch step like she'd run out of strength. "I don't recognize you," she said when I finally opened the door a crack. I leaned against the frame. "You never tried," I said. Her voice wavered. "We raised you better than this. You raised me to be quiet," I replied. "You raised Grant to be cruel." She flinched. He didn't mean it. He said it, I said, in front of my child. She pressed her lips together, then softer. "We were joking." I shook my head. "No," I said. "You were testing how much you could take." She looked past me toward the hallway. "Is Noah listening?" "No," I said. "He learned a long time ago." That landed. I saw it hit. She stood slowly as if her knees hurt. "You're breaking your father," she said. I answered without hesitation. "He broke us first." She left without another word. The next day was worse. Payroll was due in 48 hours. Drivers started calling in sick, then not calling at all. A dispatcher quit at lunch. Another walked out crying after Grant yelled at her over a missed route. At 2:03 p.m., a lender issued a formal notice. Not a freeze, a demand. By 2:17, Elaine was screaming at the CFO. By 2:20, Grant punched a wall. By 2:45, my father finally called me again. His voice sounded smaller, older. "Kara," he said, "we can fix this. Whatever you want, just tell me." I closed my eyes. "I wanted my son to be safe in that room," I said. "You chose laughter." He didn't answer. "I wanted you to stand up," I continued. "Once." His breath shuddered. "We didn't think." "No," I cut in. "You didn't care." Silence stretched. "Please," he whispered. That word used to mean something to me. "Stop calling," I said, and ended it. By Saturday, they stopped pretending. Grant left a voicemail that security later forwarded to me because he'd been shouting in the lobby. "You think this makes you powerful?" he yelled. "You're nothing without us." "Nothing," Elaine texted 12 times in a row. Threats, then apologies, then threats again. My mother sent a handwritten letter, 3 pages. I read the first line and tore it in half. They were unraveling, loudly, publicly. Neighbors started whispering. Church friends asked questions. Someone posted a photo of Dawson trucks parked in the wrong lot with the caption, "Anybody know what's going on?" Inside the family, the blame shifted hourly. Elaine blamed Grant. Grant blamed the bank. My father blamed the economy. My mother blamed me. No one blamed themselves. That's how you know who people really are. On Sunday night, Noah asked me why Grandma kept leaving food at the door. "Because she doesn't know how to say sorry," I told him. He nodded, thought about it, then said, "That's weird." "Yes," I agreed, "it is." When I tucked him in, he wrapped his arms around my neck and held on longer than usual. "Are we in trouble?" he asked quietly. "No," I said. "We're leaving it." He smiled, relieved, and rolled onto his side. Later, alone in the living room, I watched my phone light up again and again. Missed calls, missed chances. The family that had laughed together was now tearing itself apart, not because of money, but because money stripped away the story they told themselves, that they were kind, that they were fair, that they were the good ones. All it took was one child being humiliated to show how disposable empathy was in that room. They weren't losing a company. They were losing the lie that had held them together, and there was no oxygen left to keep it alive. The end didn't come with shouting. It came with a signature. Monday morning, 9:04 a.m. My phone buzzed once. One message. From Julian. Board resolution executed. Control transferred. Restructuring authority confirmed. No emojis, no congratulations. That's how real endings look. Clean. Quiet. Across town, my father was sitting at the long conference table he'd owned for 30 years. Same room where he'd once cut sheet cake and told everyone Dawson Logistics would never answer to outsiders. Same chair, same view of the yard, different reality. The new people didn't raise their voices. They didn't threaten. They didn't need to. They slid documents across the table and waited. 3 options. All bad. 1 survivable. Elaine read every page twice. Grant skimmed and missed the point. My father stared at the header like it was written in another language. Restructuring, asset sales, salary reductions, immediate governance oversight. The word family didn't appear anywhere. Grant lost his title before lunch. Elaine kept hers in name only. My father signed away veto rights with a pen that shook in his hand. By 11:30, the company that once revolved around their last name no longer did. No one called me to scream. No one called me to beg. They finally understood something. There was nothing left to take from me. That afternoon, I picked Noah up from school early. "Surprise," I said when he climbed into the car. His face lit up. "Are we getting ice cream?" "Yes," I said. "And boxes." He frowned. "Boxes." "We're moving," I said simply. He didn't panic. He didn't ask where. He thought for a moment, then said, "Okay." That was it. The trust, the safety, the difference between fear and knowing someone has you. We packed quietly, Just essentials: clothes, books. The framed photo of Noah and his dad at the beach before everything broke. I left the rest. On Wednesday, the moving truck pulled up before sunrise. No neighbors watching, no speeches. As I locked the door for the last time, my phone rang. My father. I let it ring until it stopped. Then, against my better judgment, I listened to the voicemail. His voice sounded tired, not angry, not demanding, just empty. "We lost the house," he said. "We're selling. Your mother, she doesn't understand how this happened." I deleted the message. Understanding had never been their strength. We drove north. Miles clicked by. Cornfields gave way to trees. Noah slept with his forehead against the window shark plush tucked under his arm. By the third day, the air smelled different. Salt, pine, space. The house was small. Cedar siding, one slanted roof, a porch that faced nothing but water and sky. No name on the mailbox yet. Inside, sunlight fell across bare floors, the kind that makes rooms feel honest. Noah ran from room to room, claiming spaces like flags. This one, he said, pointing to a bedroom with a window angled toward the ocean. I can hear it. Hear what the waves. That night, after pizza on the floor and a mattress dragged into place, I tucked him in. He hesitated before letting go of my hand. "Mom," he whispered, "are they mad at us?" I brushed his hair back. "They can feel whatever they want," I said. "We're done feeling it for them." He nodded, relief settling in his bones. After he fell asleep, I stepped out onto the porch. The water moved in steady rhythms. No sirens, no phones buzzing, no doors slamming, just breath. Back in Ohio, Dawson Logistics was being dismantled carefully, piece by piece, not destroyed, repurposed. Grant took a consulting role with a title that meant nothing. Elaine learned what it felt like to answer questions instead of asking them. My parents downsized into a condo near the highway. No one starved, no one died. Justice doesn't need bodies, it needs boundaries. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived forwarded from my old address, no return name. Inside was a single sentence in my mother's handwriting. "We didn't know you were capable of this." I laughed once, soft, bitter. They still didn't get it. This was never about capability. It was about choice, about what happens when a woman stops absorbing cruelty and starts redirecting it away from her child. I tore the letter in half and dropped it in the trash. On the wall in Noah's room, I hung a height chart, marked the first line, Day 1. That evening, we walked barefoot along the beach. Noah ran ahead, laughing into the wind, his voice carried away, instead of trapped in a room full of people who didn't deserve it. "Mom," he called, "it's loud out here." I smiled. "Yes," I said, "that's freedom." Behind us, an old system collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. Ahead of us, there was nothing to earn, nothing to prove, nothing to beg for, just a quiet life where no child waits for leftovers, and no woman ever apologizes for standing up.